All right. So let's talk about orthopedic injury impact on occupational performance. So for this chapter, you specifically are working on osteoarthritis. And I think you will, in your career as an OTA, see the impact of osteoarthritis related to orthopedic injury more frequently than just a standard fracture. For example, um, if you a broken leg or a broken arm. A lot of times, well, as we age, our body, just based on the impact of life, develops osteoarthritis, and that is the degeneration of the joint. Be sure to do your readings because you're not going to get a lecture on what osteoarthritis is here. But because of the osteoarthritis, you'll see more fracture-related injuries, such as if there is a fall, oftentimes you'll see a fall on outstretched arms, called a fouche, fall on outstretched arms, and there'll be a distal radial fracture. You'll learn about where the radius is in kinesiology, but that is one of the bones of your forearm. There are two bones. One is the radius and the other is the ulna. So you'll see that distal radial fracture, a Coles fracture, Colles. Hip replacements. That because of that degeneration at the hip joint, there is either a anterior or posterior hip replacement. Knee replacements, shoulder replacements, back surgeries, cervical laminectomies, or lumbar laminectomies. Now, there are four parts of the spine. Again, you'll learn this in kines, so this is not a lecture on that. But cervical spine, the 7 vertebrae of the C-spine, which is the top of the spine. Then is the thoracic spine, 12 vertebrae at the thoracic spine. And then your lumbar spine, 5 vertebrae there. And then your sacrum. Now you'll notice I said cervical laminectomy and I said lumbar laminectomy. That thoracic spine, because of the mobility of it, because of the shape of it, you will not see any laminectomies ever at that level. You might work with somebody who has had a stabilization at that joint or in the thoracic spine because of maybe a motor vehicle accident. But again, it's the head gets hit, there's the compression at the lumbar joint, so you don't really get much happening at the thoracic spine. And that will make more sense as you go through kines. But when it comes to what is the impact on occupational performance, what is the impact of orthopedic injuries related to occupational performance? So now let's just rattle off based on your readings what orthopedic injuries could be. I said some of them already. Fractures, total hip replacements, knee replacements, multi-trauma. That could be from a fall or from a motor vehicle accident, or any host of reasons why there could be multi-trauma. What does multi-trauma mean? Multi meaning many, traumatic being some sort of traumatic event that has now caused multiple fractures of the body. Spinal surgeries. You might have a fracture that requires a fixation. So I believe during orientation, one of you, and I'm blanking on who it was, Danielle maybe, mentioned that her sister had an external fixator because of a surgery that was performed on her lower extremity. So this is an actual metal cage that is fixing the bones in place. So that might be another form of an orthopedic surgery that you might see. Sometimes those fixators are internal, so you might see an internal fixation. So again, going back to what is the impact on occupational performance? So we need to, again, look at the person as a whole. What is the age of the person? Is this a young person that had a a fracture of their arm, and they're coming to you for hand therapy to work on hand function. A child, a young adolescent, a working age person. Is this an older adult who's now had a hip replacement? What is where does that older adult, in what spectrum is this older adult in their life? We need to think about, are there any weight-bearing precautions? Is this a shoulder replacement and they have range of motion restrictions? Is this a hip replacement where they can't cross midline with their lower extremity, or flex past 90 degrees at their hip? So these are all going to impact occupational performance and how they're able to engage in occupation. You'll learn about weight-bearing precautions throughout your program, but just you'll have weight-bearing precautions with spinal surgeries. You'll have spinal precautions. You'll have weight-bearing precautions with hip replacements, posterior or anterior. They'll be a little bit different, but you'll learn about those. So those are very important things to understand, how they impact occupational performance as you're crafting your treatment plan for this client. So when you're looking at basic ADLs, activities of daily living, if somebody has hip precautions and they can't bend past 90 degrees or flex past 90 degrees, or cross midline, or turn their toes in, how are they able to effectively do lower body dressing? So you might then be teaching them strategies for lower body dressing using adaptive equipment. If this is somebody who has a shoulder replacement, how are they donning a shirt, their ability to perform in that activity? If you're working with somebody who had a distal radial fracture, that FOOSH that we talked about, or a carpal tunnel release, how are they able to drive effectively? We need to think about, is pain part of something that's impacting their occupational performance? Does the pain in their wrists then impact their ability to move the wheel of the car while they're driving? So as we're crafting our treatment plan, are we creating like a plan for pain management, or strategies for managing, positioning the upper extremity so that it limits any sort of torquing at the wrist, which is then causing the pain? So we're modifying and we're adapting so that they're able to engage in these meaningful activities. How are they able to participate in home management? Carrying a basket of laundry up and down the stairs, or going to the laundromat, or folding laundry. How is all of that impacted by the orthopedic injury? Are they able to effectively engage in work? So for me, when I was in the clinic, I was up on my feet all day. So if I had a fracture of my, lower extremity, or if I had a sprain, or if I had, any host of reasons why it was challenging for me to be on my feet, that would really impact my work performance, in the context of being in the clinic all day. But now, being teaching full time, I spend a lot of time at the computer. So that lower extremity fracture might not be as impactful of my occupational performance. Certainly standing up in front of the classroom might be a little bit more challenging, but I can modify and adapt by sitting in a chair. But let's say I had that fracture, that FOOSH of my dominant hand, and I type all day. I'm doing grading, and I'm giving feedback, and I'm creating lesson plans. So that would be much more impactful on my work performance. So even, what type of orthopedic injury really can also impact the occupational performance. So meal prep is here. I think that goes under home management as well. These PowerPoints are from your from the publisher of your book. But again, going back to, what are all of the things that are impacting their ability to engage in meal preparation? Is it standing? Is it range of motion? Is it endurance? Is it overall strength? Is it weight bearing precautions? Is it, what is it what are the components, the factors that are impacting the client's ability to engage in meal prep? And we talked about driving. Let's talk about sleep and rest. If somebody has a hip replacement and they can't cross at midline, they can't flex their hip above 90 degrees. How many people in here are belly sleepers? So my sleep, my rest might be impacted because I have to change how I'm sleeping. So this is another area that you might be modifying and adapting. If there's pain, if there's some anxiety that's related to loss of work because of the injury, or stress about if the person's had to go to rehab, and maybe there's concerns about how they're paying their bills, or if they're going to be able to go back home, or if they have to go to a skilled nursing facility. So there might be some anxiety. Let's talk about sex and sexuality. If this is a young person who's had multiple traumas and they've got pain and it's hard to get positioned comfortably, you might need to modify and adapt and educate the client about different positions for sexual activities, or modifying what sex looks like. This could be, again, going back to the total hip replacement. Older adult who wants to engage in sexual activities and they've had a hip replacement. How do we give education and modify and adapt? And social participation. So again, going back to if driving is impacted, if they're not able to drive, how are they engaging socially? If they have external fixators, this might impact their self-image and their desire to engage in social participation. So again, we really need to, I'm going to say this again and again and again, and you're going to hear me say this again and again and again. We don't treat the condition. I'm not treating the total hip replacement. I'm treating the human who happens to have had a total hip replacement, or the human who's had a FOOSH, or the human who's had a spinal surgery. So we need to take in that holistic, look at all the context of the person, the occupations of the person, and then how we create an effective treatment plan for this person. So be sure to do your readings, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.